Hello, this is Real History with Melissa, and it is the 18th of September, 2025. I hope you are all doing well. Today, I'm going to be sharing something with you from Sigrida, and I did a Real History with Sigrida a few months ago before she embarked from her homeland of Lithuania and went to Switzerland, where she has been working the last, I think, 6 summers now in a seasonal job there for growers. And I think right now she's working for an organic farmer. It's a big job, a big enterprise that she participates in. And I thought we might have a real history to catch up while she was there, but she works very long. And of course, when she's having a break, she'd like to be traveling around and seeing things. But most of the time, I'm sure doing that kind of physical labor, it's early to bed, early to rise, work all day long, and then do it again. But last month, I had an email from her, a hello, plus hopefully something interesting, she said. And she said I was welcome to share it with you, and I wanted to do so earlier, but I've had a lot going on, and I couldn't set aside the time to do it. So what she shared was an adventure, an experience that she had when she had some time off. And she put it in an email with a lot of documentation, and then she sent me more images into Dropbox. And today, for the first time, about a month later, I had a chance to read the email in full and look at all of the pictures. And it's a fascinating adventure that she had. And so I thought I would share it with you simply by reading her email. And I will say this about Sigrida. She is very studious and she gets into things, and I like that. I love the sleuthing mind that dives into something and looks for connections. So this is from Sigrida. Hello, Melissa. It's been a while. How are you? I hope well, but let me know. I haven't had a chance to follow up on any of your work, I feel like, in ages. I'm a good month and more behind now, and I've no idea what you're up to on now, to be honest, since it's mainly work for me here in the farm. Really busy for many reasons, but a few weeks ago, I had been visiting a friend who lives and works in an area about 3 hours away from me, near a place called Gstaad. That's Gstaad. She works at a 5-star hotel in a little village under the name Schönride. She says pastry kitchen staff, but anyway, in the pastry kitchen. We couldn't find when to meet up for about 2 months due to our hectic schedules. But the stars have fallen into place, so to speak, and we finally managed to meet up during one weekend this month. You're probably wondering why I'm telling you all this, and the letter is pages long. But the thing is, a couple of things happened that day, full of synchronicities, in fact, and we didn't even have a plan at first at all. No plan at all. We were just happy we finally got to meet after 2 years and just walk and talk. But not that day. No, it started interestingly from the very morning already. But I'll try to stick with just the main plot as much as possible, though it will be a mouthful anyways. You know me. I understand a ton of people write you daily and always want something perhaps. You have your own things going as well, but I swear I wanted to write you about this already the very next day. It just took me about 3 weeks to assemble all of it together bit by bit, as you can see. The overwhelming majority in the last couple of days, because I do not generally have much free time or energy left after the entire day, or there are other obstacles getting in the way. But I thought if I stall any longer, will it even be relevant at all, or an opportunity perhaps missed? So my apologies to Siggy for not getting to this sooner. So this is now going on 2 months since she had this adventure, but I still felt it to be relevant. One reason why I am sharing this with you today is I thought perhaps you'd find this real-life example of mine interesting enough to read for yourself and first and foremost, and then it might be useful at some point. And if you wish to use any of this for future projects or illustrate a point or two along the way, you can. I don't mind at all. In fact, I would be glad if it were somehow useful to you and not just rambling to myself and putting more load on you as well. I share this story with you because I know you would get it, and there's no one around my proximity that I could share this with. Then she suggests another person that she might share it with, and I may mention him later on in the email. I'm not sure she wants me to share everything here, but I'll just get going. She says, I'm sorry it's not so well polished with all the inserts and links there, but it's the best that I could do in the time that I had. Somewhere, something might be lacking to explain my side, perhaps, as to why I see connections with this or that, but I hope you'll get the picture and you'll have your own insights. So getting back to the story, well, I hope you enjoy reading it. So since it was to be such a lengthy journey and we really wanted to be productive with our time, I went there with an overnight stay the evening prior, so our real adventure began the next morning on August the 3rd. The day started with us visiting her workplace shortly to get a sandwich so we could venture off to the nature soon after that. I knew about the area where I was heading for years, but it was my first time visiting. It has always been regarded as a high-end place where the rich folks hang out and all the expensive stuff that goes along with that. So I had that in mind, but still, until I arrived, I had never been in a luxurious place like this, except for museums and castle tours and stuff like that. As I've mentioned, it was a 5-star hotel. This whole area in general, near Gstaad and surroundings, is extremely elitist. Things like, and there's some links here and I'll supply all that for you, but an elitist top world's 150 private university, the Institut Le Rossi, all kinds of luxury resorts. Folks like Roman Polanski, the famous pedo, enjoyed refuge and residency. The list includes all kinds of influential people from art, royalty, business, and culture. To name a few, Grace Kelly, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, the Shah of Iran, Yehudi Menuhin, and more on him later, Ernesto Bertarelli, biotech billionaire and philanthropist, George Soros, etc. So it is a very elitist area. And my friend has been telling me that, yeah, there was once another hotel where she worked previously. An Indian prince came and rented the whole entire floor with the most expensive suites worth over thousands per night for an entire month and had his own staff and his own bed sheets and stuff like that. One face for the people outside, another one for in privilege and things like that. So, okay, we go to the hotel to grab a sandwich to eat later and leave. We get in, and shortly thereafter, at the doorstep, we're confronted by the service manager, a very peculiar person, I'm sure is a Freemason, just from the stories I've picked up about him later on, and a deviant pervy, for sure. He had an unreadable face, but treated us exceptionally welcoming and had a certain charisma around him. We've even got sat almost immediately for a whole 5-star breakfast for free. He knew my friend as a member of staff, but even she was left speechless and barely uttered a word, just agreed to everything. And me, I was just witnessing everything, trying to understand, is this a good thing or bad? Whatever. We were having our breakfast. Soon I realized that I forgot my phone on the floor at the friend's flat while tying up the shoes before leaving, and so since we were not in a rush, we'd agreed to miss the current bus to our next destination to go back and get it. Now, mind you, I almost never lose things, so why now, of all times? Eventually, her boyfriend was going to bring it up to us on his way out to work, so we ended up having some time for ourselves, left wandering around for a bit in the corridors, mostly where the staff works, etc. It was interesting. I saw an antique closet, nicely lit with a glass over it and some fancy pieces of paper on display. After my initial experience with this hotel, and the name of the hotel is Ermitage, that's like Hermitage without the H, pronounced kind of Frenchy, although it's in a German section. But anyway, Ermitage. I've been on the quest of looking for the signs and symbols to tell me more about the kind of establishment that this was. I already assumed it was special, to say the least. This piece of paper was signed for and by the International Association of Lions Club Charter since 1986, which of course is one of those undercover charitable Masonic groups like the Rotary and others. Here's a photo of it. Have a look. My friend told me that the top guys of that club come over a couple of times a year for a private meeting, and they're a bit of a pain in the you-know-what with their requests, but she didn't see anything about this. She's a good person, but she's a normie. Something about the name of the hotel, though, Ermitage, I knew it must have more meaning to it from the start. I had my own interpretations, but I'll add a little piece from, and she mentions Robert. So I had written her, she said, coincidentally, and not related to this story at all, about the word. I think that's going to come up. So the name of the hotel, Ermitage, which is Hermitage, if it was to be translated into English. Then she gives another link there to the hotel, and I'll insert that there. So she said, here's the bit that Robert sent me about the word hermit. He said that he wasn't working at the moment, and he decided to read through Alan Watts' books for a second time, starting with CTTM Volume 1, or it's actually cutting through Volume 1, The Androgynous Hermaphroditic Agenda, and pointed out to Sigrida that on page 23, first paragraph I come across is the meaning of hermit. Well, it's more the historical etymology of the word than the literal meaning. To be honest, I don't understand the connection, Robert wrote. So you know about the people the ancient Greeks called the troglodytes, right? They called them Hurrians. They ruled Persia at one time because they had been known to live in caves. The Greeks also called them Hermae. Came the advent of the English language 500 years ago, and that became hermit. Surely, if the Greeks called the trogs Hermae, this must be related to Hermes, who the Romans called Mercury, the trickster, the god of boundaries, roads, travelers, merchants, also mercenaries, from the Latin Mercury, thieves, athletes, shepherds, commerce, speed, cunning, language, oratory, wit, messages, and most notably, he is the herald of the gods. While this doesn't leave much else for the other gods, he's often depicted as a baby. From Hermes, we get words like hermetics and hermeneutics. When I look up in the dictionary, the original meaning of hermit, it's of the desert or desert dweller. And I can't find it right now, Robert writes, but Alan says somewhere else the Trogs were called the Hamites in the Old Testament, and in 1200 BC they invaded Egypt. The Egyptians called them Hyksos, or dusty ones. I'll get in there too. There's a connection with cattle and cattle driving. There we get the desert connection. Desert dweller, that is the first usage of the word hermit. My question is still, what is the connection between the god Hermes and hermit, really? There has to be one. And what about the planet Mercury and the earthly element Mercury? More exploration is required. So that's the end of Robert communicating to her about hermit. Siggy writes, back to the plot of the story again. We still don't really have much of a plan as to what to do with the rest of the day after this very generous breakfast. Since I've never really been there or this area in general, we take another bus thereafter to, and I don't know how to say this town, but Laonense. And we have a walk and talk in nature. And while we're awaiting at the bus stop for the bus to come, just 4 minutes before the bus arrives, out of nowhere, my friend got a message from the reception staff that there were 2 free tickets available to a concert happening in Gstaad, where we're heading, starting at 11:30 a.m., which is an hour from now. Turns out there's a festival going on in the area, a Menuhin Festival. Apparently so famous, I knew nothing about it, and it lasts for over a month. But it is not easy to get the tickets, and they're not always exactly cheap. The prices vary between 40 Swiss francs to 360 Swiss francs. And I like Siggy's note here quite a bit. She said, life begins at 40 and there are 360 degrees in the circle kind of situation. No? Perhaps me reading too much into it. Well, and I would say to Siggy, you can never read too much into things. Then she said that the tickets, she said some are by invitation only, and we were just offered some free expensive seats that somebody had just canceled on going. Of course, we were astounded, but ran out very quickly to grab those for ourselves and somehow made it back to the same bus, yet still, and also to the event on time without stress. We've listened to a concert, which was of classical music, performed by an amateur symphonic orchestra, and we enjoyed ourselves quite a bit in the front seats. All these rich folk around us. She gives me a smiley emoji, and us. But this one we both really enjoyed and couldn't believe our luck. On our way out of the venue, they were collecting donations with the baskets like in church, and folks were not hesitating to throw those bills in. And on the way to exit was a bar that was offering 200 milliliter drinks for 200 Swiss francs. We could almost pass out from the cringe of it all. Moving along. You know, Gstaad in itself is a village town. It's not very big, but the very few buildings that they have are mostly restaurants, cafes, lodges, and very, very luxurious brand stores. The buildings, same as the hotel I've mentioned earlier, were in traditional Swiss style, made out of wood, and there were symbols everywhere. But we were just trying to enjoy ourselves, and I've tried not to let my observations cloud the joyous occasion. We made jokes pretending we were one of those, the rich folk, and had fun. If my friend asked me, "What's the time?" and I would say, "I don't know, you didn't buy me that Rolex, remember?" Mwah, as we were passing by the store. So we went on, got ourselves on another bus, and ventured out into nature. Spent a good couple of hours there, not in a rush at all. Crossing paths with the folks wearing sunglasses worth more than our entire month's salary, but we were having fun. And right towards the end of our trail, we got the signal back because the phone doesn't work in the forest and the mountains around us previously. So for some reason, right then, my friend got a call from reception again, which she normally says never happens. And she was so surprised that it was happening today. She said she just couldn't understand what was going on and joked that perhaps we'd be getting another ticket to the concert for another day. It's just so bizarre. It's quite impossible, People book in advance to these things. Yet, sure enough, the staff was calling to tell us that in about an hour and a half at 1800 hour, so that's going to be 6 p.m., we have free tickets to the event happening today, this evening, at another town in the area, Sannen. And this time we don't even need to get back to the hotel and take our tickets from there because we can go straight to the place. The tickets will be waiting for us at the door. And this event was by invitation only and for the most important people at that. We were thinking to ourselves, what is happening today? No way. Okay, let's do it. First of all, the timing was impeccable. Secondly, great that we didn't need to get back to the hotel to get the tickets, as that would have made it impossible to make it on time. The only problem that we had was that we were still quite far away from any bus stop. We were still out in nature, and the bus we checked on and the connection that we were going to need if we were going to make the first bus, it was going to bring us, but then it would be too late either way. My friend started to panic. She knew the area better, and she knew that our chances of getting there on time were pretty slim. Well, I don't know why, since I haven't done it in years, but a thought came to my mind, and I said nonchalantly, let's try hitchhiking. I have a good feeling we'll make it there on time. I did. Just don't worry. I've done this before, and I know if the stress is involved, the cars suddenly are not stopping, nothing is going the way you want it, and so on. But when you're not fixated on the problem, then suddenly just the right car appears and you're going. I've really said that, and it's really been my experience before. But we still first needed to get to the road where the cars are going. Another smiley face emoji. And she said initially we were in a bit of a hurry, but we finally got on a single road and there were barely any cars passing, barely. 1, 2, 3, no one stopped. But after like 3 attempts, the 4th little red car stopped without hesitation. And a friendly foreign French girl who also worked in the hotel in the area took us. We were just asking if she could drop us at Gstaad, which was the first town on the way, and then we would still try to catch the bus and just be a little late. And she said her place was before the town, but she'd drop us off there anyway. And that was already something for us. And as we went along, we started talking. We got into a hearty conversation, and she said, well, come on, I'll take you to Sunnan. Let's go. So it was, in the end, indeed the right car that picked us up. We made a friend who was in need of companionship at the time as well. She had been living here for a year already, and it has been a huge struggle for her. Then she let us off in Sunnan, or Sunnan, I'm not sure the pronunciation, Saanen, Sunnan. And since it was the most efficient way of getting there, we still had 15 minutes to ourselves before the event. Again, no stress. So we went off to get our tickets and get our seats. Turns out the event was taking place at the local church. Not a huge one. Almost a chapel, I guess. A very old one, though. And she sent a picture of it on Google Maps. And then another picture of the church at Sunnan from Wikipedia. It has quite unique frescoes decorating the interior. Unfortunately, we didn't get to spend time looking around afterwards for any special clues if there were any. But the way this is the very church from where the founder started the festival. She said, by the way. Okay, by the way, this is the very church from where the founder started the festival and where he used to practice as a youth. Later, I found a quotation from the founder, Yehudi Menuhin, and he said, I feel at home in Gstaad. I started a music festival there in the wonderful little church in Sunnan, which is, this is still the quote from Yehudi. Oh, no, this is Siggy's comment here. She says, so he felt at home in Gstaad and he started a music festival. And then Siggy said, which is an elitist place, and that's where he feels at home, this guy. All right. But taking into account my surroundings and the whole circumstances of the day, I was already kind of suspicious about the thing, as well as still amazed from all the synchronicities that had led to this point. We got our seats. They were splendid. Front row again, an unusual place, as the performance was going to take place in the very middle of everything, where the preachers normally do services. There was a piano, but there were also seats from behind covering the rest of the area. So we could see the musicians as well as the rest of the audience in front of us and on the second floor and the rest of the interior of the building. The pipe organ was decent, but I've even asked my friend at some point before the show started, could have been the lighting, but I said, is it just me, or does the top decoration on it appear to be some head of a beast? Does that look like that to you? And she confirmed that it did. And I asked her to take a picture of it since her phone camera was better than mine, and that is included. I will give you the picture of the top of the pipe organ. The title of the event reads, Unobscurious Rebel, Music for the Planet 1, Inner Emigration 2. And she said there are untranslated pictures from the booklet in Dropbox, and I did see those, so I will give you those to look at. The performance was about to begin. We were expecting something as nice and classical like in the beginning of Our Lovely Day. But there from behind us entered a lady presenter, Meret Matter. More info in the pages of the booklet, page number 65. To our disappointment and disadvantage, she started to make a speech in clear German, which was apparently a part of the entire special performance. And there was a guy with a drum accompanying her, oddly, as she would continue. Immediately, it felt different. I was already starting to roll my eyes inside my head as soon as I realized the fact that this was not just some formal introduction as usual, but part of the show, and we're just going to sit and not understand half the thing since it's all connected. But not even a minute in, and the stage lady pronounced some key words that even I could get. The Club of Rome. Limits to growth, she said, and continued. And I was immediately struck with attention, realizing from then on exactly the idea of this whole event, what it was more or less about. What sort of, quote, special, even to the special audience, was this? And as she would speak for a while, then she and her drummer would draw back to the backstage right where we were sitting and give it to the musicians. And this was repeated a couple of times. They would get out, she would step in, do the weird talk and that odd drumming. I've tried to understand something, but I have not much of a vocabulary in German. My friend also. I've tried to find a recorder on my phone immediately after hearing her say that phrase, but I couldn't. So instead, I've just turned on a video hoping I would catch something, and that's in Dropbox. 5:55 minutes. She did mention Club of Rome once again towards the end. It was an odd performance, really. The whole thing was. The musicians as well. There were only 3 of them, playing classical instruments, a piano, violin, and cello, but with a modern twist. Nothing in it was quite classical apart from teeny tiny bits, but 95% was dramatic chaos. It was inconsistent. The faces they were making were too much. I could have just guessed it has some connection to what has been said by the lady speaker prior to every entrance, but I couldn't wait for it to end. The whole thing took a bit more than an hour, I think. While the torment was going on, the only thing on my mind was to try to find a way to figure out what that lady had said for real. And I came up with the idea that after the performance, I would approach her and say, "Oh, my German is shite, and I just really wanted to better understand the whole idea and the words spoken. Could I take a picture of the script?" I thought for sure I could appear convincing enough, and so I waited. At some point, she had left before the end, and I hadn't seen the papers in her hands, so I assumed they must have been left where she was sitting, somewhere behind our backs, and I was going to look for it. But after the show, there were no papers, only a staff member who I approached about the same issue, and she kindly assured me that I should try to send an email to the organizers, and I would probably have no problems getting it. And so I was on my way to my friend who was waiting behind inside, amidst the flowing crowd, facing the doors, and as we were getting closer, my eyes stopped at the handful of papers near the exit, and I thought, perhaps it's the sheet music, but I checked anyway, and to my surprise, voila! They were unnumbered, but I have recognized some phrases, and this was the script. It was all happening within seconds. The people were just passing by, and I spent my time taking pictures, not knowing if it was even allowable. My friend was already outside, and so I stole them. Yep. I went off and didn't look back, cringing to myself. My friend was entertained from the whole thing now. When I finally got home, I was able to assemble the sequence and the order of pages using a translator. It was just 7 pages. I've added the pictures of a translated version and the original in Dropbox as well. Now, the meaning of the words, in many cases in general, and in the script, does not have to be one-sided. it can have more than one meaning. They usually speak with the forked tongues, as we know. My commentary on it started by mentioning the sun, of course. It rises in the morning, and the setting of the sun, the end of the world. It's the sustainability agenda, our favorite authors, etc. I've underlined some things everywhere a bit. Later, it is followed by this ballad from the Swiss writer Franz Holler that was read about how the end of the world would supposedly happen, and it is the title of the ballad as well, mind you. It is both revealing but also mocking of the ill-informed mass man, of course, and how he isn't even aware of his own fate. So Franz Holler is a well-known Swiss writer, cabaret performer, and musician, renowned for his humorous and often satirical short stories, radio plays, and stage performances. His works frequently blend elements of fantasy, absurdity, and social critique. I had some logistical challenges today, I'll put it that way, so that I actually could not make the video at home. I had to be somewhere borrowing a computer. I know it's crazy, but that was my day. And I was doing the video, I was about halfway through, and I realized that I had neglected to actually read what Siggy wrote, what she translated. So these were the pages in German, remember, that she was so keen to get after the program, and then she actually swiped them. And that gave me a chuckle, but I didn't record that part of it. So I only read the email and not these pages. So I did it on the fly on, just a little portable audio thing. And as I was plugging the pictures in, I thought, oh, that sounds okay. That's pretty good. And I rendered the video and then flew out of there, came back home, and I was getting ready to upload it. So this is going up late. That's what I'm saying. And the sound was it's just not good. So I'm re-recording this part that Sigrida translated. So these are the pages from the program. She starts off, linguistic backlog. We still tell what happens in the morning. The sun rises. Although since Copernicus, it has been clear that the sun stands still and the world ends. How will it set? In the early 1970s, the first report of the Club of Rome, Limits to Growth, appeared. It used scientific means, percentages, curves, and graphic representations to show that our Earth is a limited system in which one thing affects another. It also described the greenhouse effect as a possible scenario, which leads to the climate change we are confronted with today. In other words, we have known it for a long time. In 1973, Franz Holler tried to express this insight in a different way, a poetic one, and wrote a ballad about it. The End of the World by Franz Holler. The end of the world, ladies and gentlemen, will, according to what we know today, proceed roughly as follows. In the beginning, on a fairly small island in the South Pacific, a beetle will disappear, an unpleasant one, and everyone will say, "Thank God this beetle is finally gone. That disgusting itch it caused, and it was always full of dirt." A little later, the inhabitants of this island will notice that early in the morning, when the birds sing, a voice is missing. A high, rather shrill one, like the chirping of a cricket, the voice of the bird whose food, it is clear, was the small, dirty beetle. A little later, the fishermen of this island will notice that one species is missing from their nets, that small but particularly delicate one. Here I must interrupt and mention that the bird with the rather shrill voice has, or will have had, the habit of sweeping out to sea in a long loop and emptying its feces during this flight. And for the small but particularly delicate species of fish, this species was their daily bread. A little later, the inhabitants of the continent near which the rather small island in the Pacific lies will notice that tiny black insects are gathering everywhere, on the trees, on the grass, on the handles of their doors, on the food, on their clothes, on their skin, and in their hair. Insects they have never seen and they will not understand. Because they can't know that the small but particularly tender type of fish was the food of a larger, not at all tender fish, which it, in turn was simply hunting a different type, a small yellow stickleback of the same size, which mainly ate these black insects. A little later, the inhabitants of Europe, in other words, we, will notice that egg prices are rising, and dramatically so. And the chicken farm owners will say that the corn, which makes up a large part of the chicken feed, is suddenly no longer available from the continent near which the relatively small island in the Pacific lies, due to some plague of insects that had been successfully contained with poisons, but unfortunately, the corn was also destroyed in the process. A little later, things are happening faster and faster. No chicken at all is making it onto our plates. In the search for a substitute for the corn in chicken feed, the proportion of fish meal has been doubled, but every fish these days has its own specific mercury content. Until now, it was low enough not to harm anyone, but now we're facing a worldwide chicken kill-off. A little later, the inhabitants of that rather small island in the South Pacific will run terrified from the shore into their houses because they have seen something completely unfamiliar. The tide was in today, and it should be noted that the sky was blue. There was no wind, and the waves were low, as always in fine weather. Yet this afternoon, the shores of the island were under water, and of course, no one knew that on the same day, all over the world, people were running from the shores into their houses, calling the rising sea by its real name. A little later, inhabitants of that relatively small island in the South Pacific will climb from the roofs of their houses into fishing boats to head towards the continent, where the incident with the corn happened. But even there, the sea has already risen several meters high, and the cities on the coast and the harbors are already deep underwater. The thing is, they had to burn all the poultry, 6 billion of them poisoned as they were, and the coal dust that was created from that finished off the atmosphere, which had already been strained by heat and combustion. It let the sunlight in as before, but no longer out, which warmed the air so much that the ice at the poles began to melt, the cold came to a standstill, and the seas rose. A little later, the people who have since fled to the mountains will see a strangely pale light behind the peaks far on the horizon, and they won't know what to think because they can hear a faint rumbling, and if one of the elders now suspects that the battle of the great ones is beginning for the last remaining space for the peoples, others will ask bitterly, how on earth did it come to this? Well, ladies and gentlemen, the sea rose because the air warmed. The air warmed because the chickens were burned. The chickens were burned because they had mercury. They had mercury because they were fed fish. They were fed fish because the corn didn't come anymore. And the corn didn't come anymore because they used poison. The poison was needed because the insects were coming. The insects were coming because the fish no longer ate them. The fish didn't eat them because it was eaten. It was eaten because the other one died. The other died because a bird no longer flew. The bird no longer flew because a beetle disappeared, this dirty beetle that was there at the beginning. The question remains, ask it bluntly, why did this beetle disappear? That, ladies and gentlemen, is unfortunately not yet fully understood, but I almost believe it had a bad diet. Instead of eating grass, it ate grass with oil. Instead of eating leaves, it ate leaves with soot. Instead of drinking water, it drank water with sulfur. That's how you commit sacrilege against yourself in the long run. The question remains, I'm already preparing myself for it. When will that be? Scientists usually scratch their hair. They say in 10 and 20 years and 50 maybe, or even 100. I myself have changed my mind. I am certain that the end of the world, ladies and gentlemen, has already begun. So much for Franz Holler in 1973, over 50 years ago, and where are we today? When will that be? Fortunately, the end of the world has not happened, and it will not happen, say the unconcerned. But the Club of Rome was right, say the worried, wiping the summer sweat from their brows and looking at the Blatt debris cone, or the Aletsch Glacier, which melts by 50 to 80 meters every year. Franz Holler says he himself is an optimistic pessimist and agrees with Martin Luther, who once said, "If I knew that the world was going to end tomorrow, I would still plant a tree today." Creation. In the beginning, there was nothing but God. One day, he received a vegetable crate full of peas. He wondered where they could have come from, for he knew no one but himself. He didn't quite trust the thing and simply left the crate standing, or rather floating. After 7 days, the pods burst and the pea balls shot out into nothingness with great force. Often, the same peas that had been in a pod stayed together and orbited each other. They began to grow and shine, and thus, out of nothing, the universe was created. God was very amazed by this. Later, all kinds of living creatures developed on one of the peas, including humans who knew him. They attributed the creation of the universe to him and worshipped him for it. God didn't object, but to this day he still puzzles over who the hell could have sent him the crate of peas. From the end of the world back to the beginning of the world, with a second possible version of creation. The goddess. In the beginning, before the world was created, God wandered through nothingness, looking for something somewhere. He had almost given up hope and was dead tired when he suddenly found himself in front of a large barracks. He knocked, and a goddess opened the door and asked him to come in. She was, she said, busy with creation, but he should sit down for a while and watch her at work. At the moment, she was planting various aquatic plants in an aquarium. God was extremely astonished by what he saw. He would never have thought of creating a substance like water, but this, said the goddess with a smile, was, so to speak, the basis of life itself. After a while, God asked if he could perhaps help a little, and the goddess said she would be very happy if he could bring the water and her previous creations to one of the planets she had set up a little further back. She would like to start on the least important one, on a trial basis. So God began bringing the goddess's creations, one by one, from her barracks to Earth. And it is not surprising that later the people on this planet knew only the God who had brought all this and considered him to be the true creator. But they knew nothing of the goddess who had thought it all up, and therefore it is high time that she was mentioned. Franz Holler's ballad, Die Weltuntergang, The End of the World, is a short but powerful poetic piece that reflects his characteristic blend of satire, absurdity, and social commentary. In this ballad, Holler imagines the end of the world happening quietly and absurdly, in a way that contrasts sharply with the grand dramatic apocalypses often portrayed in religion or Hollywood. Summary. The poem starts with a man going to the post office, a mundane setting. While standing in line, he hears the world has ended. This is announced calmly or overheard without much reaction. Strangely, nothing really changes at first. The people go about their business. Only slowly does the realization of the apocalypse sink in, but by then it's too late. The world is already over. The themes and interpretation, the absurdity of modern life. Holler plays with the banality of how people might receive world-ending news, in line at the post office, shrugging it off like everyday news. And the satire of human apathy. The ballad critiques our inability to react meaningfully to serious issues, perhaps alluding to climate change, war, or societal collapse. And then there's bureaucracy versus reality. There's irony in people continuing to follow rules and routines, even when reality has collapsed around them. And later the script ends with two texts of the same author, Franz Holler, about creation, which are, in my opinion, full of mockery of the Creator and his omnipotence, wrapped in a contemporary story, which is full of esoteric allusions from ancient times. I'll just throw in a couple of sources in no particular order that I think will provide more in-depth explanation to this, or at least have some connections to it, by Alan Watt and William Bill Cooper. I don't have all the books with me here, and I'm myself very limited, but I've used what was most available at hand at the moment, and perhaps not the most accurate quotes, but I hope it still makes sense somehow. In the book Waiting for the Miracle, page 208, Alan Watt talks about how Freemasonry works in providing us with situations and creating new religion. After reading this part, I thought exactly of this occasion, that the whole event. This is from Alan Watt. With the third series, you have primarily women in charge, and the men take on a secondary role, which fits in again with the Knights Templar, Freemasonry, Mithraism, the Mother Goddess type thing, and the movements, which even the stewards, the head of the Knights Templar today, is green, which is a turn to the worship of Mother Earth. That's according to them. This is the oldest religion that's ever existed, just simply being brought back again. Freemasonry believes that the female is the carrier of all creativity, but she's not the doer. Now, this is William Bill Cooper, Mystery Babylon Series 2, quoting him. The next point to be made requires first a little background. Christians have always referred to God as the Father. But viewing God as a father didn't start here. It goes back far into the ancient world. The reason is, according to the mystery religion, our planet was always viewed as our Mother Earth or Mother Nature. And that's where all this Mother Earth and Earth Goddess comes from in the New Age movement. And since rain, the life-bringing fluid, or the semen, says Bill Cooper, falling from heaven, impregnated and brought life to Mother Earth, it was therefore believed that our Father was in heaven. All this life-bringing intercourse between God the Father and Mother Earth would be after a proper marriage ceremony at a spring wedding in the area today called Israel, anciently called the land of Canaan. The sexual fertility rites of spring were celebrated each year in what was called the marriage feast of Canaan. And so the New Testament story was, Mother Earth asked God's Son to draw water from the sea for the grapes to make fine wine for the wedding feast. And this marriage feast story is over 5,000 years old, 3,000 years before the New Testament story. And the mystery schools believe it is. Just one more case of pious plagiarism. Your first birth was out of the water your mother formed you in, because her water broke and your new life began. Rebirth is symbolized by coming out of total immersion in water, or baptism, or being born again. And from Mystery Babylon Series 4, Part 2. Now, if we concede that Osiris is the positive pole of the universal life agent, And William Cooper says, as the mystery school does, then Isis becomes the receptive pole of that activity. He is the doctrine, she is the church. As in Christianity, it is customary to refer to the church as the bride of Christ. So in Egypt, the institution of the mysteries was the great mother, the consort of heaven itself. From this interpretation, we gain a deeper insight into the symbolism of the whole Osirian cycle. Isis, you see, becomes the temporal order of the priesthood, the accumulative body of initiates. She is personified as the temple. She is the mother of all good, the protectress of all right, and the patron of all improvement. Now we can apply this analogy to a great modern system of initiation called Freemasonry, which has certainly perpetuated at least the outer form of the ritual of the ancient rites. And William Cooper says, to the profane, or to the members of the lower rung of the initiatory ladder, to the adepts of the priesthood, the higher initiates, then it is clear. Freemasonry, as an institution, is Isis, the mother of mysteries, from whose dark womb the initiates are born in the mystery of the second or philosophic birth. Thus, all adepts, by virtue of their participation in the rites, are figuratively, at least, the sons of Isis. As Isis is the widow seeking to restore her lord to avenge his cruel murder, it follows that all master masons or master builders are widows' sons. They are the offspring of the institution widowed. By the loss of the living word, theirs is the eternal quest. They discover by becoming. William Cooper in Mystery Babylon Series 35 says, and the mother was known as the goddess of the sea. The sea was called the Mare. The goddess was called Mary. Series 31, towards the end of the show, around 45 minutes into it, Bill Cooper says, and yes, there you do have it, ladies and gentlemen. I want to read you a letter that I received today. Talk about synchronicity. From my good friend in Tucson, Arizona, A. Ralph Epperson. And I'll just interject here that A. Ralph Epperson is quite entertaining. I don't know if he's still living, but he is entertaining, and he has a lot of interesting things to say about Freemasonry. So Bill Cooper says he received this letter from Epperson, and I quote, "You might enjoy letting your listeners know about a quote I just found in a book entitled Legend of the Ancient and Accepted Scottish Rite of Freemasonry for the Southern Jurisdiction of the United States, written by Albert Pike. This book was written by Mr. Pike in 1888, 3 years before he died, and was published by the 33rd Degree Council when they were in Charleston, South Carolina. This quote should settle the question once and for all as to who the God is that the Masons worship in their lodges. Here in Tucson, one of their lodges is called a cathedral and another is called a temple. Two God-created words describing places of worship. This quote will prove concretely that the God they worship is not the God of the Bible. I have been looking for this book by Pike for many years, and I presumed that it was out of print because I couldn't locate a copy. However, I knew it was not forgotten because Rex Hutchins, then a 32nd degree Mason, but who later became a 33rd degree Mason, quoted from it in his Masonic book entitled A Bridge to Light. So I considered it fortunate when I found that a publisher of out-of-print and rare books called Kessinger Publishing Company in Keila, Montana, had reprinted it. It is their claim that Legenda, I think I might have mispronounced that before because Siggy's writing it with an A and I didn't look it up. So their claim that Legenda is a series of monographs intended to supplement the ritualistic instruction of the book written by Mr. Pike called Morals and Dogma. As you know, the first 10 words of the Bible are found in Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, and are, "In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth." That means, says Ralph Epperson, that in the time before there was something, there had to be nothing. So something out of nothing when he created the universe, or there would not have been a need for a beginning. But Mr. Pike does not agree. This is what he says on page 109 of Legenda in his explanation of the 28th degree. Nothing is produced from nothing, because existence can no more cease to be than nothing can cease not to be. To say that the world came forth from nothing is to propose a monstrous absurdity. Everything that is proceeds from that which was, and consequently nothing of that which is can ever not be. The letter I in the word is was capitalized by Mr. Pike. It is customary to capitalize the first letter in the name of a deity or a noun that refers to a deity. Does this mean that he is making a deity out of matter? Well, folks, Lucifer is the god of the material world. So Mr. Pike says that those of us who believe in a God who created the universe out of nothing believe in a monstrous absurdity. The Christians and the Jews who believe in the God of the Old and New Testament, well, I don't know if they believe in the God of the New Testament, but believe in a monstrous absurdity when they profess that their God made the universe out of nothing. Let there be no doubt. Pike told his readers that he and the Masons do not worship the Creator God. They worship a secret and concealed God in their cathedrals and temples who cannot create anything. In fact, Mr. Pike agreed with that statement. He wrote this about their sun god on pages 253 and 254 of Morals and Dogma. I might remind you that Radio Free America is carried by the Sun Radio Network. So here's what Pike wrote. Ammon, at first the god of Lower Egypt, was the sun god. He created nothing. And to show that this is true, he repeated the idea on page 281. The supreme being of the Egyptians was Ammon, a secret and concealed god, the original light. He creates nothing, yet he calls this god the supreme being. If the universe had two gods, one who created everything from nothing and one who created nothing, I would presume the first God who made everything, including the second God, would be superior to the second God who created nothing. So the only way you can resolve this problem is if you believe in this second God who created nothing, is to claim that there's no creator God. Then your God can then become the supreme being. And that is what Mr. Pike did. Make no mistake about it. The Masons do not worship the Creator God, the God who made the world out of nothing, and that is why they have chosen to call their God the great architect of the universe. And that is why the Brotherhood in the ancient times was called the Builders, and today they are called Freemasons or Franc-Maçons in the French. It is known that architects do not draw plans to create a structure out of nothing. They design structures that must be built from existing materials. Or, if you will, out of materials that must be changed from one form to another before they can be integrated into a structure. The Masons worship some other being, one that they know can create nothing. And that includes the Stella group, S-T-E-L-L-E. That includes the ancient order of the Rose and Cross, the Rosicrucians. The Knights Templars, the sovereign and military order of the Knights Malta, and all of the rest of these skunks. So that was Ralph Epperson's letter to Bill Cooper. This then is Siggy writing. And I apologize, I know it's kind of boring sometimes to hear somebody just read, but I still found the content to be interesting. So I carry on reading. Siggy wrote, I shall also mention that the choice of the dress that the female presenter was wearing was also a bit interesting. It stood out from everyone else from the beginning. The dress that she was wearing, and she sent a link from a site called wolfandbadger.com EU, the dusk dress and tattoo, and I will see if I can reproduce that for you. It was printed not only with all kinds of symbols, zodiacal animals, a heart pierced by daggers, Also, wordings and phrases. I thought her outfit was curious since she really stood out from the crowd with it, since everyone else wore more formal outfits, and I think it was meant to fit in with the whole theme. Then she sent a link about the festival itself. The festival started 18 July and ran through 6 September of 2025. So this would have been the timeliness of it had I been able to get this up a little sooner. The theme was change. In 2023, the theme was humility. And transformation in 2024 and migration in 2025. So there's a cycle to it, change. And that's what Siggy said. So it's a cycle. Sounds just fantastic, doesn't it? More in detail. And she supplied the program and tickets website. A piece of work, I tell you, word for word. And also, Limits to Growth report by the Club of Rome is mentioned again towards the end. There's a lot about sustainability to fight climate change, lots of partnerships and initiatives mentioned. Our path to comprehensive sustainability. We live in a time characterized by rapid societal and climatic changes. Sustainability is the need of the hour. With Mission Menuhin, Gstaad Menuhin Festival and Academy embraces this responsibility. Step by step, we are embarking on a journey towards comprehensive sustainability in all areas of our business. Siggy makes the note. Our previously mentioned Ermitage 5-star hotel is a patron to the whole festival, as well as the Edmund de Rothschild Company. More info is in the booklet in Dropbox, and there are other bits in there as well. There are more pictures from the booklet of the patrons, the sponsors, the partners, the institutions, the foundations, as well as the organizers, and what they have to say about this year's event, what change or migration means to them, etc. And there are some pictures that I will include for you. Siggy said, another interesting thing I should mention. I don't like paperism myself, but at the very last moment of the day, I suggested a booklet of the event, quite lengthy, made from each week separately. And this coincidentally had a woman on the cover with her name on it, and it drew my attention because I could instantly recognize a fellow native. The booklet depicts a worldwide famous female Lithuanian, and I won't try to pronounce her name. It ends Tyla, dirigent. It starts dirigent Mirga, and I'm not sure Grazin yet. I said I wasn't going to try. Anyway, this is an honorable lead, a special performance on August the 9th, in one of the most beloved symphonies of all time, Dvořák's Symphony No. 9, From the New World. And I thought, oh, really? How original. Of course, I'll have to have a quick look into it later as well. And so here's an overview of the Symphony 2. Antonín Dvořák's Symphony No. 9 in E minor, From the New World, is one of the most celebrated works in the classical symphonic repertoire, composed during Dvořák's time in the United States. It said that the world premiere was December 16, 1893, at Carnegie Hall in New York City. From the New World, inspired by Dvořák's fascination with Native American music and African American spirituals. Dvořák didn't directly quote American melodies, but absorbed their spirit. He believed that American music, especially African American spirituals, could serve as a foundation for a national style. The symphony played a role in shaping American classical music identity. Then there is the space travel legacy of the symphony. So I guess a recording was taken to the moon by Neil Armstrong on the Apollo 11 mission of 1969. Now, there is a lot that she includes from Wiki on Menuhin, and I will link to this, but I will because it's quite lengthy, I won't read it all, but I will give you a few things that Siggy highlighted there. Lord Menuhin, the founder of the classical music festival bearing his name, is still remembered as a world-famous violin child prodigy, conductor, and humanist. So they do go out of their way to mention that. He's an honorary resident of Saanen. During the Second World War, he played 500 concerts for Allied troops. He became a symbol of peace. He was elected president of UNESCO's International Music Council in 1969, made an honorary burgher of the commune of Saanen, and burgher is a town or city. And that's 1970. 1993, the British Queen appoints him Baronet of Stoke-Dabernon. Sir Yehudi Menuhin becomes Lord Menuhin. The Dabernon part reflects Norman ancestry. The Abernon family were Norman landowners. And now, because of this, he's a hereditary baronet, not a knight. His love of different cultures, his musical creativity, and his humanitarian work made him an important citizen of the world. In the course of his life, he was also an active teacher and campaigned for humanitarian projects. He was into yoga and health. He went to New Zealand and studied the yoga. I guess he met the yoga teacher, B.K.S. Iyengar, which just... as a side note here, Iyengar is basically considered one of the leading yoga teachers, really the popularizer, one of the key popularizers of yoga to the Western world. So I can link to that. You can look it up more. But the meeting there developed into, it says here, a lifelong and fruitful friendship. In 1954, Menuhin invited Iyengar to come to Europe and accompany him as his yoga teacher. Iyengar accepted the invitation. As a result, Iyengar made yoga popular in the West. Menuhin also contributed to this development himself when, as early as 1953, Life magazine published a series of pictures of him in various yoga poses. So he advocated for ecological responsibility. He was one of the first residents in London to drive an electric car. He ordered his first electric car in Detroit in 1976. He thought people-friendly urban planning, that's your 15-minute city that you can walk in, was a good idea. He proposed that the streets of New York be pedestrianized and that car traffic be moved underground. He used to engage presidents, princes, and politicians in discussions and tell them passionately and urgently what needed to be done. Menuhin rejected not only Zionism, but every form of nationalism. Even in his first interviews, he described himself as an internationalist. In the 1950s, he argued that world peace could only be achieved through the establishment of a world government. And all of this work was done decades before he was knighted. Menuhin helped a vast number of different cultural and charitable organizations, from music schools and societies to the preservation of composers' legacies, and the initiative of the lawyer Grenville Clark, who wanted to promote world peace by creating a global legal system. And then it goes on to tell you all of the many, many, many different awards that Menuhin won in his lifetime. And so then Siggy goes on to tell us some root names and some meanings of the word Gstaad. She says is rooted in Old High German Gstaad or Gstaad and regional Swiss dialects Stad or Stad. That's with two A's there. Bank of a river. And this is where the first event took place. And then the second event, where the 5-star hotel Ermitage is Schönried, and that is beautiful and lovely. It usually refers to a piece of land used for pasture or farming. And Saanen, or Sanon, one of the oldest and most historically significant villages in the Bernese Oberland, and the name likely comes from Celtic or pre-Germanic roots like Celtic word Sarona or Sarnon, possibly meaning flowing water. Historical name evolution, Sanon, double the sun, Siggy wonders. Could be reading too much into this because Sanon is also famously about goats. But she says, I wonder if the satanic symbol of goats plays into this. But anywhere, Sanon is where the second event took place. And Siggy wraps up by saying, what can I say? The whole day was full of firsthand experiences within an elitist environment, and it made me think and proceed making links in my mind about the many things happening on a daily basis in every corner of the world, and at firsthand, and this is kind of funny, for the globe view of the earth versus the flat earth. Isn't that kind of funny that we call it the four corners of the world or the four corners of the earth? That occurred to me the other day. I'd never gotten into the whole sphere versus flat, but that did cross my mind. At first hand, seemingly innocent events like going for a concert to listen to some classical music, for example. And this is just one personal example, but a recent one. There are so many symbols and statues here in Switzerland. And you will know that I did a real history last year with Sean Ross. And he's lived in Switzerland and covered that very thoroughly over many, many years. But she said, in Switzerland, they're just constantly in your face if you know where to look. I could go on and on. My friend, of course, has had no such experience as mine. She saw and understood nothing behind any of this. She was entertained, but my brain was on the go. The agenda is really happening, quite plainly, right under the public's noses every freaking day. And I'm very sorry again. It's a lot of info to read and all the links and photos and the booklet to translate. And if you've got nothing interesting from it, then I feel bad for wasting your time. But at least I'll have this as a diary for myself, as well as everything in one place. And she said then all of the photo and video material that I have is in Dropbox. And I will try to supply as much of that for you as I can if you're interested in this. But I found it to be an interesting day trip that she took. She said that we weren't able to document much of it. Much of it we were just allowed to be present and experience it. And she said, if this wasn't at all interesting, then by the way, did you know that scientists are now working on a new floss-based vaccine? And she sent me a little YouTube clip, and sure enough, there is a woman who is flossing her teeth and having a vaccine delivered. Yep. To which people, to my horror, in the comment section are mostly excited about. And of course, if they're talking about it, then it's probably already been done. Right? So, let's see. Oh, okay, there's a little footnote here. Warm hugs, yours, Siggy. I was wondering whether I should add this little bit or not, but eventually I thought I would. I have just finished writing all of the above during Sunday late in the night. In fact, it's after midnight. Everybody went to sleep a long time before me. I was sitting in the living room area all day up to this point, and I was just waiting for my poor, slow computer and the Wi-Fi to finally upload everything to Dropbox and not crash, so I could finally press send to you and be happy that the project of the month is done and gone. While I was waiting for the files to upload, I sat on the couch nearby and slept without realizing it, something I've never done here before. But somehow I woke up, this must have been about after 1 a.m., and I saw that something was wrong with the upload. In the meantime, I uttered a sigh of disappointment, and I decided I'd rather finish this up the next day quickly and check everything thoroughly if I'd not made any mistakes before sending it to you. I took everything and then finally after some time, I went to sleep. About 1:30 a.m. Okay, so it must have been about 12:40. Not even an hour later, I'm slowly awakened by some harsh noises outside and loud voices. Some sort of upheaval, and just right as I'm opening my eyes, the sound of a massive explosion and a flash of bright orange light outside the window before it completely struck me and my senses. Something terribly wrong is happening now. I jumped out of bed, got into some pants, slippers, and rushed towards the door. My room is in the basement level, right before the stairs, leading down from the living room where I just was. And I see fire and smoke, an insane amount of smoke, emitting a terrible smell, and it was all going upwards and nothing down, really. Someone from outside desperately shouted my name. They couldn't get me. There were other doors to my neighbors that have the loft on the same floor, and they were awake already, and we all ran out of the house through the other exit. There were about 5 people at that time in the house. We all got out safely. It was a horror show to look at both the inside and out, but no one got hurt, thankfully, no pets either. My friend's husband was the one shouting my name, and the others, the one there in the smoke trying to put out the fire, or at least minimize it. There was a hose next to the place. But he was putting himself in terrible danger and wearing no protection, just in his shorts. Everyone ran into the yard as we were all in our beds, and it was a cold night. I rushed to tell my friend, who was my boss and the owner of the farm, we're okay. Did they call the firefighters already? And she said they called them long ago, but they were still not there, which was insane to all of us because the town with a unit was just 3 minutes away, and they should have been there in like 8 or 10 minutes. They did show up eventually, a lot of them, from 3 different municipalities after about half an hour. If the husband of my friend wasn't risking his life and using this high-pressure water hose, things would have ended up way worse. Any house would have been 100% in flames in that amount of time. What was helping was that this wasn't a typical traditional Swiss-style house with a wooden structure. There was one many years ago, and it burned down as well. This wasn't the first experience for them, but during the years, a new one was rebuilt on top of it in a completely modern structure. Nothing was flammable. Basically, everything minimal and concrete, no wallpaper, tile on the floor, etc. Thank goodness, because the nightmare had just recurred. I felt bad for my friend, really, the whole family of them, that this was happening again. What happened this time, it turned out there was a motorcycle battery charging throughout the day and was left to charge through the night because it wasn't finished yet at all. And it caught on fire. The lithium battery just caught on fire on its own, and at some point it was not only burning and melting and creating a dense toxic smoke, but it just exploded in all directions with metal parts and stuff, starting tiny little fires wherever they've gone. It was real life, but somewhere a cinematic experience, if I have to put a picture on it. Thank goodness the flammable objects and furniture were far away. The whole place could have burned to a crisp that morning once again. My friend and her husband regularly sleep in the van in front of the house during the summer because their bedroom on the second floor gets heated up from the roof throughout the day. So it's more fresh staying like this. So they were already outside with the dog. At some point, this dog started barking, and they both woke up and they saw the fire and the horror show. And they knew all those people were inside sleeping. It would have been a completely different situation had they both been spending the night upstairs. The toxic smoke going upstairs could have suffocated them in their sleep without even realizing. And me, I was in that very room not long before it happened, also asleep. And could have been for good this time, but I was awakened and went to my place, ending up safe and without a scratch. We barely slept, and we still had to work the next day, a couple of hours later, actually. There was just no way around it. But I'm thankful that no one was damaged, not people nor animals. Everyone was okay. We were blessed. You know, this upcoming Saturday, we were going to celebrate a 40-year anniversary of the farm and a couple of birthdays with a party, a joyous occasion, and thank goodness we can still have that. I was planning on sending you the letter yesterday evening, but the tiredness and lack of sleep knocked me out entirely, and so it is today. But better late than never. You know what's secretly perhaps the single most weird thing about the whole experience was that I was completely calm. I later pondered about it, thinking, am I some sort of psychopath? Is there something wrong with me? Do I have no emotion? But then I realized, and it struck me in that moment, I had a dream about this farm being on fire exactly 1 month before. That time, and I'm a sound sleeper, I woke up at 3 a.m. in the morning and I noted it all down on my phone, as it was one of those dreams that just sits with you for a while after you've had one, if you know what I mean. It was realistic and yet still quite metaphorical on the first glance, but after this, it completely made sense because I had been warned. And my friend knew about the dream too. I had shared with her at some point. And she said she had the feeling of something with the fire for about half a year now, but her focus was on something else, which wasn't the issue this time. So here we are, and I'm once again reminded for myself that we live in a special world, and it's not all made of solid, you know. Once again, yours, Siggy. So I will supply pictures and links, and I appreciate Sigrida sharing us the trip and adventure that she had in Switzerland. Thank you all for listening. Next week, it's on the books that Nick and I are going to be talking about the second novel in the space trilogy, Paralandra, that's C.S. Lewis, and I'm looking forward to that. So take care and have a good week.